Hello, and welcome back to The Wrinkle. I'd like to share a story with you. This is the story of Bob and Emily. Emily was referred to us this week at the Specialized Geriatric Medicine Clinic, and I had the opportunity to see her and her care partner, Bob. Emily was actually diagnosed with dementia with Lewy body about 5 years ago, and she's been living with the symptoms of this condition for these 5 years, and actually probably a little bit longer, because when she was diagnosed she had been having symptoms for a couple of years. Bob is currently doing it all by himself. So Emily has some behavioral responses to her environment in that she does get up several times a night. Bob has a bed alarm so that he can tell if Emily is getting up, and he can respond, make sure she can get to the bathroom safely if that's where she's going, or to make sure she doesn't go outside or try to leave the home, which has happened before. He's also put some locks and some alarms on the doors that go to the outside in their home. Bob shared with us that he really doesn't feel like he can leave Emily alone for more than a few minutes. They do go for long walks twice a day, weather permitting, but other than that, Emily doesn't go out to any recreation programs or adult day programs. And Bob has never had Emily go into a long-term care home or retirement home for a respite stay. So a respite stay is usually where somebody who's living with dementia will stay at a long-term care home or retirement home for a period of time, maybe a few weeks or maybe just a weekend. And it kind of gives a break or a respite to the care partner. So we noticed this, and we asked Bob how he felt about that. And we pointed out that it's a little bit unusual for somebody who's been living with dementia for a long time and someone who's at a fairly moderate to severe stage of dementia, needing somebody to be around them all the time so that they don't have responsive behaviors and don't run into any other challenges related to challenges with memory and recognition and language and so on. How was it that Bob was a one-man show? Why didn't he have any services or any other help? And Bob just felt like he didn't really need it. He really liked being with Emily. Most of the time she was pretty quiet. He had developed some strategies to manage those responsive behaviors, and he just felt like things were great. And he was hopeful that things were going to stay this way for as long as possible. True, they were progressing a little bit. A year ago, he probably could have gone out and Emily could have stayed on her own for a few hours. Now he can't do that, but he was just hopeful that things were just going to stay as good as they were. Why is this potentially a problem? Why did we encourage Bob to actually think about getting some help? Well, being a care partner for someone who's living with dementia is a hard job. Here are 3 reasons why I think it's important that a care partner for someone who's living with dementia should have some help. Number 1, it really does take a team to manage a person who's living with dementia. We wouldn't say to the parent of somebody whose child had a serious illness or cancer or something like that, cystic fibrosis, we wouldn't tell them to just do it all themselves. We wouldn't say, well, that's what mothers do. They look after their kids. We would offer nursing help. We would offer education. We would offer whatever it takes to make sure that that person was well supported and wasn't outside of their depth in doing the care. And we would also make sure that there was adequate time for the mom to be a mom rather than be a nurse or be in some other role. So why don't we do that with people with dementia? It's okay for people who are living with dementia and their care partners to have help. It doesn't mean that they don't have a strong marriage or a strong friendship or a strong parent and child bond. It just means that it takes a team to manage this medical condition, and there's nothing wrong with that. The second reason why it's important to get some help when you're a care partner is that care partners who have more stress, and this is natural stress, people who have more stress are more likely to be abusive to the person who's living with dementia. That's just human nature. And most of the people who are care partners aren't mean or malicious or vindictive people, but it's natural when there is a lot of care partner stress that it may bubble over and it may change into abuse. There's actually been research on this, and we do know that the higher the caregiver stress, the more likely there is to be an episode of abuse or neglect. The third reason that we should accept help if we're being a care partner for someone living with dementia is that it affects our own health. So if you want to be around to be a healthy care partner for your family member who's living with dementia, you have to be healthy. We know that people who are care partners have more health problems. They have a higher risk of getting ill themselves. There have actually been studies looking at the levels of stress hormones in people who are care partners. And people who are care partners do have higher levels of things like cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And if people are exposed to higher levels of this hormone over time, it can have damaging effects on health. Some strategies we know do not help with care partner stress. And those are things like wishful thinking, like just kind of hoping that it's going to get better and just hoping for the best. And, it's been good so far, so it's going to keep being good. That's probably wishful thinking. And the sister of wishful thinking is denial. So kind of just minimizing that there are some negative aspects to this disorder and there's a potentially negative prognosis. Denying that would not be productive and might even lead to more stress. The other strategy that doesn't work is avoidance. So if, someone from the community care concepts or one of the other agencies calls, just kind of avoiding them and saying, no, we're fine, we'll be okay, no, it's not a big deal. I guess that's a bit like denial, but generally avoidant coping strategies, they don't really work and they're going to be counterproductive. The last thing we said to Bob that seemed to strike a chord is that it's always good to get help before you need it. And that can seem counterintuitive, but it's like we were talking about in our long-term care video about transitions. It's often good to make a transition or an adjustment or introduce some new aspect of care or a new team member when things are going well. Sometimes if we wait for a crisis, we're just setting things up to fail. If somebody is already in a stage of dementia that's advanced so that there's difficulty remembering people that a person with dementia is meeting or being able to learn things about management or recognize things in a new environment, going through a transition is always going to be hard and it's not as likely to be successful. It's a good idea to add people to Emily's care team now so that she can get to know them and that she can adjust to this new routine. Because she might not 100% need these team members or this day program now, but it's really likely that she's going to need them within the next year or so. And it's going to be much easier to make the transition before there's advancement and before Emily has less of the skills and the reserves that would be helpful in her making that transition. So we explained all of this to Bob, and we did arrange for him to get a phone call from one of the agencies. And I have a lot of faith in agencies like our local health integration network and like the Alzheimer's Society and some of the other agencies, including some private agencies that work with seniors and work with people living with dementia. They're pretty good at meeting people where they are and figuring out the best way to make those services as easy to accept as possible. We're going to see Bob and Emily again in a couple of months, and I'm hoping that that'll promote some accountability as well on Bob's part, because we're going to kind of expect him to report back what kind of help he and Emily are getting and what changes they've made in their routine. We didn't actually make any medication changes today with Emily. A lot of times in dementia care, the medications are not as helpful as some of the other things like building a strong team around a person and creating other opportunities for a person to have other experiences and have other people provide care. Opportunities to protect Bob's health as well as Emily's health. So if you are a care partner and it's difficult for you to accept help, now sometimes it's difficult to find help, but if the help is there and it's hard for you to accept it, then I hope that this video has given you maybe a different way of looking at it and has maybe brought you closer to accepting some of that help. I would love to hear what you have to say about being a care partner and about accepting help. Please feel free to comment, and I do answer every comment that I get. And also please feel free to subscribe to our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and we'll keep putting out videos. We also take requests. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Wrinkle.